Hey, so welcome to this webinar with TESOL Simple Education in Vietnam. And I'd like to thank um, Ha Tran from TESOL Simple Education for inviting me to give this webinar after she saw my presentation at IATEFL in Edinburgh. So a little bit about myself. Um, my name's Chris Fry. I worked at the British Council in Barcelona for nearly 40 years. Um, but I retired 10 years ago. So what am I doing here giving a webinar about using artificial intelligence to give feedback to students? Well, the reason is that in my classes 20 years ago, my students began recording themselves in class. And by the end, they were recording themselves in class on average 2 or 3 times every lesson. And I've got many of these recordings, thousands of them. And when I discovered automatic speech recognition and generative AI, I thought, wow, if only that had been available when I was teaching. So I started simulating how I would have used it. So what I'm going to show you today is the result of those experiments. I'm going to give a demonstration of the 9-step prompt that I've developed to get feedback on speaking using TurboScribe and ChatGPT. Then you're going to have hands-on practice using your phones. And I shall introduce the idea to you that maybe you don't want to get your students to do all 9 steps from the beginning. Maybe introduce it little by little. Then I'm going to give you some ideas for classroom and self-study use that I used myself. And then there'll be time for questions and answers. It is important for this webinar that you should actually have an account for ChatGPT and an account for turboscribe.ai. It's also best if you've downloaded the ChatGPT app. So if you haven't, maybe that would be a good idea to do it right now. It's much easier if you can read QR codes, but I think almost all phones today um, can read QR codes with a camera. If you're in another room, if you're in a room with other people, um, it may be useful to use earphones so that when you're listening to your recordings, you won't disturb them. So this is a little poll, a survey to find out if everyone has got the necessary accounts for TurboScribe and ChatGPT. So are you ready for question 1? Okay, that's the QR code. That's the short code. If you can use those, then you can answer the first question. Okay, give you a little time to make sure you've got onto that page. So here's the first question. Have you got accounts with TurboScribe AI and ChatGPT on your phone? Yes, I've got both. No, I haven't got either. I've only got an account for ChatGPT. I've only got an account for TurboScribe AI. And the second question is, have you got the ChatGPT app on your phone? It really helps if you have, because you'll be able to listen to all the different versions that ChatGPT provides you with. And are you using a computer to participate in this webinar? I hope so, because that's the easiest way to participate. No, I'm using my phone. That will be a problem because you're going to be using your phone not to participate in the webinar, but to record yourself. If you're using an iPad or tablet, you'll probably be okay anyway, as long as you've got a phone as well. So what we're going to learn here is how students over the age of 13 can use these instant feedback, use these tools to get instant feedback on their speaking. So they've got to be over 13, and we'll talk about that later. Another QR code for you. I'm afraid there are a lot of QR codes. Look, you don't need to keep taking screenshots of the webinar because you're going to have the complete presentation available to you. If you use this QR code or this short code, you can get access to a folder which includes another folder called Vietnam, where you've got this presentation and other materials as well. So please click on that, use that to get access to the Google Drive folder that I'm sharing everything with. These are the two tools that I'm talking about. TurboScribe is, to my mind, the best free automatic speech recognition tool that can be used by 13-year-olds with parental permission. On a free account, they limit you to 3 recordings every 24 hours, and most of my students would have been all right. Only a few of them recorded more than 3 times in 24 hours. 30 minutes as the length of the conversation is far more than my students ever needed. A great thing is that it can be done in many languages, and we'll be using that later on. The integration with ChatGPT is an added bonus. So these two tools are both available for use by 13-year-olds and older, but if they're between 13 and 18, you will need written permission from their parents to use it. So let's have a look at how this works. What I'm going to show you here is the comparison between a verbatim description of the transcription of a recording made by a good B1 student of mine. And you can see that the word boat is marked in red because that's probably not what the person wanted to say. And you probably noticed already the mistakes to woman's, but that is exactly what the student said. And Rev has done a lot of work with legal transcriptions where you actually need to write down what the person said, not what you thought the person said. TurboScribe, on the other hand, is like a cooperative listener. When it hears 2 women's, it assumes that you said, or meant to say, 2 women, and puts that in the transcript. And it interpreted what Rev considered was boat to be bought, because that fits in with the context. And you can see that the student made some mistakes with the tense of the verb. So say has been rendered as said. So this is the first thing to learn about TurboScribe, that it will make automatic corrections. Let's just listen to it.
Okay, there are two women and they are talking about a new sweater that one bought. One of the women said to the other that she likes a lot her new sweater, and the other said that she bought in the sales. The woman asked her how much it cost.
Okay, you can see that she's quite fluent. She's talking at about 100 words a minute, which is quite good for a student of a foreign language. Let's continue with the second half of her recording. Here you'll see things was what Rev considered the student to have said, but TurboScribe guesses quite correctly that it was actually thinks that she meant. And you can see said, and was, things that the student said in the present tense have been converted into the past tense because that fits in with the overall recording. But the most interesting one of all is on the first line where it says, if you want, you can guess the price. Now, the student didn't say can at all, but most English speakers would use the word can there, but it will be pronounced very quickly. If you want, you can guess the price. So it put it in. Listen, and you can check that she didn't say can.
And the other say that if you want, you guess the price. And the other thinks that the price maybe was 80 or 100. But the other are very happy and say that no, because they have 25%. So the final price was 67. And she thought that this sweater was a bargain.
Okay, so simply using TurboScribe can help students learn from their mistakes and learn that something like, if you want, you can guess the price is better than what they said. Let's have a look now at ChatGPT. The first thing I asked ChatGPT to do is to identify the errors, not correct them, just identify them. This gives the student the opportunity to think about what they said and think about how they should have said it. Now, some of these will be more difficult for the student to guess the correction. But I think one that's going to be quite easy is said that she bought in the sales. I think many students would realize when they see it written down that they'd missed out the word it. Said that she bought it in the sales. Let's have a look later down, right at the very end, the last one there. Said no because they have 25%. Now that's not right. And I suspect the student knew it wasn't right, but they couldn't remember how to say it. Seeing it written down, can they remember now? They have 25% off, or they have a 25% discount. Well, if they can retrieve that themselves, that's a good thing. Let's have a look at this step 2, which is showing the corrected version. So changing likes to liked and changing liked a lot her new sweater to liked her new sweater a lot. That's an important one. Now, students can take some notes here about these corrections. And I think that's a very useful thing to do. Said that she bought it in the sales. Okay. Said that she had bought it in the sales. Right. That's an important one. If a student couldn't guess that that was how to correct it, that's something to make a note of. The woman asked her how much it had cost. I agree. That's much better. I felt that how much it cost wasn't bad at all, but had cost is actually correct. And the next one, the other said that she could guess the price. That's better. You have said in the past, and so you don't have can in the present, you have could in the past. And a couple of other changes, thinks to thought, and maybe was, change that to might be. That's a more sophisticated thing. And they have 25% has been corrected to there was a 25% discount. So that's step 2. And students here should be taking notes about anything that's interesting to them. Sometimes it's just a slip. They knew, but they didn't get it right. Step 3 gives you the complete text. And the reason for this is because if you're using the app, you can then listen to it. So listen to it being read by Maple.
There are two women, and they are talking about a new sweater that one bought. One of the women told the other that she liked her new sweater a lot, and the other said she had bought it in the sales. The woman asked her how much it had cost, and the other said she could guess the price. The other thought that the price might be 80 or 100. But the woman was very happy and said no because there was a 25% discount, so the final price was 67. She thought that the sweater was a bargain.
Okay, now the student obviously knows the word bargain because they used it themselves. So let's look at step 4. So steps 1, 2, and 3 are all about correcting mistakes. Step 4 is about improving what the student said. So instead of saying there are two women and they're talking, there are two women having a conversation. That's more sophisticated. One of them bought, one of them has recently bought. So it's improving it. Bought is right. Has recently bought is also right. Look at the next one. Had bought it in the sales to got it in the sales. Got it in the sales is more colloquial. And I like the next one. Her friend said she could try to guess the price. That's much better than said she could guess the price. She could try to guess the price. Now, the last one here, there was a 25% discount, perfectly all right. But another way of saying it is it had 25% off. So at this stage, students should make notes of anything that's interesting to them. So perhaps here it had 25% off is something they'd never heard of before. So they want to write that down. It's an alternative way of saying there was a 25% discount. And the one about her friend said she could try to guess the price, I think that's a good one to take some notes on. Now, step 5 is going to provide the complete, improved transcript, half a CFR level up from the student's original. And we're going to listen to it now read by Arbor on the ChatGPT app.
There are two women having a conversation about a new sweater that one of them has recently bought. One of the women told the other that she liked her new sweater a lot, and the other replied that she got it in the sales. The first woman asked how much it had cost, and her friend said she could try to guess the price. The woman guessed that it might be 80 or 100. However, her friend smiled and said no, explaining that it had 25% off, so the final price was 67. She said she thought it was a real bargain.
So something a student can do with this is to read it aloud themselves. If they've chosen the voice that is a suitable voice for them to imitate, they can really try to imitate this voice. So if they want to use British English and they're a man, this would be a good one to use. So we're going to go up one more CFR level. So this is, in theory, 1.5 CFR levels above the level of the student. So the suggestions are you change 2 women having a conversation to 2 women are chatting. Picked up recently is obviously more sophisticated than has recently bought, and told the other that she liked her new sweater a lot is absolutely perfect. But it's much more sophisticated to say, complimented the other on her new sweater, saying she really liked it. Replied that she got it in the sales, explained that she'd bought it in the sales. I think they're equally sophisticated. But what about the next one? Her friend told her that she should try to guess how much it was. Now, guess how much it was is much more sophisticated than guess the price. And so if the student is ambitious, trying to upgrade their language, that would be a useful phrase to make a note of. And similarly in the next one, laughed and said it was much less. It's a useful expression. And explained that it had 25% off, explained that there'd been a 25% discount. So it swaps between the two, but there had been is quite an upgrade to the language there. And the last one, a real bargain and an excellent deal. I know that student would not have understood the word deal. The great thing is that ChatGPT will answer any questions you ask. So if you say, what does deal mean? It will give a good explanation in this context at the level of the student, because ChatGPT has been told to do that. So let's go up, move on to a more ambitious level. We've got the complete version of this. So we can listen to this. This is Ember reading it.
2 women are chatting about a new sweater that one of them picked up recently. One woman complimented the other on her new sweater, saying she really liked it. The second woman explained that she'd bought it in the sales. The first woman was curious and asked how much it had cost, and her friend told her that she should try to guess how much it was. She guessed 80 or 100, but her friend laughed and said it was much less. She explained that there had been a 25% discount, so the final price came to 67. She added that she thought it was an excellent deal.
Even if a student can't use all this new language, they may select something that they want to try to use, but it will giving them comprehensible input. So something they can understand easily because they in fact said the same thing. It gives them exposure to that. So we're going to go up to a more ambitious level, and you may feel that you've gone far enough. You may decide that step 7 is as far as you want to go. So when you use this with your students, you may say, I don't want to know about step 8 and 9. But let's have a look. This is one more level up. So it's now 2.5 levels above what the student said in theory. So let's have a look at a selection of these. two women are chatting, two women are having a friendly chat. That's fine. Let's move down to the third one. Instead of complimented the other on her new sweater, saying how she really liked it, admired the sweater and mentioned how much she liked the color and style. So admired, for a Spanish student, that's easy to understand, but maybe in Vietnamese, the student wouldn't understand it, and she can simply say, what does admire mean? And ChatGPT will give an explanation. The one about the guess, she should try to guess how much it was. I much prefer could take a guess at the price. To take a guess is much more sophisticated than just to guess. So laughed and said it was much less. Okay, smiled and told her that it had actually been much cheaper. That use of the word actually is very colloquial, very natural there. And look at the very last one here, an excellent deal. Deal was going to be difficult for my student, and a real steal for the quality would be difficult. But fortunately, the student can ask for an explanation of the real steal. Before we look at that, the problem of vocabulary, let's just listen to Vale reading this aloud. I have to say, Vale is the voice I like most, and it's the one that I've got on my phone.
Two women are having a friendly chat about a new sweater that one of them managed to get at a good price recently. One of the women admired the sweater and mentioned how much she liked the colour and style. The second woman told her she'd found it during the seasonal sales. Curious, the first woman asked how much it had cost, and her friend replied that she could take a guess at the price. She guessed 80 or 100 euros, but her friend smiled and told her it had actually been much cheaper. She added that there had been a 25% reduction during a special promotion, which brought the price down to 67. She said she was really pleased with the purchase and thought it was a real steal for the quality.
So the word purchase there might be a problem as well, but it isn't a problem, because if you say to ChatGPT, what does a real steal mean? It gives this explanation. A real steal is an informal idiom in English that means something bought at a very low price, much cheaper than expected, and seen as a great bargain. For example, I only paid 20 euros for these shoes. They were a real steal. They were very cheap for the quality. And it gives a tip for learners of B2 and above, B2 plus and above. You can use this phrase instead of always saying it was cheap or it was a good price, or I suppose it was a bargain. It sounds more natural and expressive in conversation. So if a B1 student picks up this expression, it was a real steal, or they were a real steal, well, it should be quite impressive. So I've shown you the 9 steps there, and I've suggested that you might want to stop at 7 with your students. But I'm going to go further than that, and I'm going to suggest that maybe you want to introduce all these ideas to your students little by little. So at stage 1, the first time you use any of these ideas, just use TurboScribe AI, nothing else, not use ChatGPT. So get students to use TurboScribe to record themselves doing a speaking task. Get students to listen and follow the transcript, to note automatic corrections, and to edit mistranscriptions. We'll look at that in more detail. And now you're going to be doing it yourself. So you're going to need your phone. if you go to turboscribe.ai in the browser, if you're using the Edge browser, that's more convenient, but don't do the next things. But I will take you through the instructions that you should click on the microphone, then immediately click on pause recording, and then set the language to your weakest other language, because I'm going to ask you to use a language that you're certain to make mistakes in to tell a story. Then I'll ask you to click on resume recording, and you can record yourself telling the story in the 4 pictures that I'm going to show you. So let's go through the different steps that I've described there. So with TurboScribe, you need to click on record and then immediately click on pause recording. You can see here that it took me 4 seconds to hit pause recording. But you need to do that because then you get the opportunity to change the language. So what I'd like you to do is to choose a language that you could try to tell a story in, but that you'd be certain to make mistakes. So not your own first language, not English, the language you teach, but another language. I did it in Catalan, I did it in Spanish, my wife did it in Italian. These were all languages that we have learned. I don't know what other languages apart from English you're likely to speak in Vietnam. But you've got a pretty wide choice to choose from. This was just the first 11 or so. But go all the way down. Vietnamese is there. Obviously, don't do Vietnamese because I want you to be making mistakes. Now, don't do this yet, but when you've chosen a language, before you begin to tell the story, you click on resume recording, you tell the story, and when you've finished, you click on transcribe. So don't do this now because you've only got 3 recordings today. So this is the story I want you to tell. It's from Don Burns' Progressive Picture Compositions. It's an old book. This was from 1970, 75, something like that. The illustrations are by Victor Bertoglio. So what I want you to do is to record yourself retelling the story to your imaginary partner. In the classroom, I think this would be projected on the board and you would see it, but your partner would have their back to the board and would be looking at you and listening to what you said because you would be telling them the story. And I've suggested that you could include one false detail for your partner to identify later. So I'll give you a few minutes to record yourself telling the story. Resume recording. Transcribe when you've finished. I hope you've had time to retell the story in your second or third language. So this is what you or your student should do. So you listen and follow the transcript to check for any automatic corrections and make notes. That's the most important thing. A secondary thing is this, that you may need to edit the transcript to correct any obvious mistranscriptions. This is a real example one of my students was saying he was a handball player, but her pronunciation of handball player was not so good, and TurboScribe interpreted that she was saying he was a humble player. So you need to correct that, because otherwise it'll include humble player all the time in the other versions, and you really want to correct things like that straight away. So let's look at how to do that. So to listen to your transcription, you click on the three dots there on the right, and then click on Open Transcription. I think actually if you double click on the three dots, it opens the transcript. So you should listen to that and make some notes. And I mean it seriously. Take a piece of paper and a pen and take a few notes about things that have been automatically corrected by TurboScribe.ai. If by any chance you need to edit something, I suggest that you put the volume at 0, so turn the sound off. You can see that arrow at the bottom, and then click on the sentence where the correction needs to be made, and then click on Edit. I'll show you an example here. This was an English speaker, native English speaker, who said IATEFL, but acronyms are very difficult for TurboScribe to interpret, and it thought the most probable thing was my temple. But it was important to correct that. So you click on that sentence that says my temple with the volume at 0, and then you can click on Edit and you can write in IATEFL instead of my temple. And then when you've finished, you go to the three dots again and you get a menu like this, and you click on Done Editing. So that's stage 1. And I feel that stage 1 might be as far as you want to go the first time you introduce your students to recording themselves doing a speaking task. After the break, we'll continue with stage 2, which is using the 9-step prompt with your class, but introducing it little by little. Okay, so welcome back to the second half of this webinar. This is introducing the ChatGPT prompt, which is a 9-step prompt. And as I suggested, we would be introducing it little by little. So TurboScribe on its own is useful, but with the addition of ChatGPT, you can do so much more. What we're going to look at here is using the first 3 steps of the prompt about errors. So that's identifying the errors, correcting the errors, and providing an error-free version for students to listen to and read aloud. So I think students can work with their neighbor, for example, to try to see if they can correct the mistakes which are identified in step 1, and they can talk about why the corrections in step 2 are correct. And of course, if there's a teacher present, they can ask the teacher. They can then listen to the corrected version without mistakes, read it aloud and repeat the task, particularly if they're going to stop now at the end of stage 2. So the first part of the 9-step prompt that's only including the first 3 steps, begins with some general instructions to ChatGPT to remove the timestamps. Do you remember there were some little numbers at the beginning of each sentence? And you really want those removed. I then asked ChatGPT to decide the level on these 2 scales, the GSE, that's the global scale of English, and the CEFR, which can have sort of plus for half bands. But I suggested don't reveal it. And this is the result of a previous version of this webinar in which one of the participants suggested that it would be very upsetting for a learner at B1 to be given a grade A2 or A2 plus. And it might be better just to give supportive feedback rather than grading the student's work. But ChatGPT has to know the level to do the next steps. So after each of the steps 1 to 9, wait for me to say, type next. This means that you can make one prompt, one long prompt, have a number of steps to it. I also suggested write in continuous prose. Sometimes in the past it had produced individual sentences rather than a continuous text. And we've seen already that it can answer questions at the learner's level. If you remember a real steel, I think it was, that we saw. So let's have a look at how to do that. So these are the 3 steps, right? Identify error, correct error, and write the corrected version without mistakes. Now, I'm going to suggest various ways in which you can share the 9-step prompt or the 3-step prompt or the 5-step prompt. With you, I'm going to suggest that you use the QR code here or the short code down here. Or later on, I'll show you another option, which I discovered during a face-to-face talk in a conference, where I photographed the screen and was able to extract the text from the photograph. So make your decision. Do you want to use the QR code here, which will take you to a Google Doc? You can use the short code there to go there. Or if you want to go to the next slide, you can take a photograph of this. To do this, you want to put your camera horizontally and take a photograph of that. And I think on all, or certainly most mobile phones, if you take a photograph now, you can then extract the text. And the symbol for that is a little circle with a T inside. So you've got 3 ways to get it. A photograph of this, or the QR code here, or the short bit.ly code here, 45, capital L, capital Y, P, capital G, capital I. So once you've got the 9-step prompt, you want to select the bits in color. Here I seem to have selected the bit at the bottom, which is just a little note saying that this is 949 characters long, including the spaces, and there's a maximum allowed of 953. So if you adapt this prompt, as I think you should, you can't make it longer than 953 characters, including the spaces. So we're only interested in the blue part of this now. So how do you use the part of the script, the part of the prompt, or the whole prompt in your case? So copy the whole prompt with copy, and then you're going to click on the 3 dots at the top of your transcription, and it should open up a menu which includes ChatGPT. If your phone's quite small, you may have to move the menu up because the menu is very long. So click on ChatGPT, and that opens another menu, and that's got six items, and you want to choose custom prompt, because the custom prompt means you can write your own prompt. Well, you're going to copy and paste the prompt in there. So you've chosen custom prompt, and you can see there is something written there. You're going to get rid of that, so just delete it, and you'll get a blank rectangle where you can paste in what you've just copied. So you can see it's in here. Now, once you've pasted it in, you click on Generate ChatGPT Prompt. What that will do, it will add in a few introductory prompts from TurboScribe explaining that this is a transcript and that it should use the same language as the transcript for everything it does. So you generate the ChatGPT prompt, you generate the ChatGPT prompt, and you copy the ChatGPT prompt. Now, what you do next depends on whether you have got the ChatGPT app. If you've got the ChatGPT app, just open it and paste in what you've just copied. It's certainly better to use the app if you've got it. If you haven't got the app, you can just click on Open ChatGPT, and it should open ChatGPT in a browser. So you're now taking the role of a student. What you should do with the story you've recorded, you should look at the errors and think about how to correct them. Maybe there's something there that you didn't say quite right, but now you know it's wrong. You think you know the right answer. When you've thought about that, write next and press the up arrow and look at the corrections. Do you understand them? Take some notes. Seriously, take a piece of paper and a pen and write down some of the corrections that you think you would like to include if you did the task again. If you now write next and press the up arrow again, you'll be able to see the corrected version. And I'll explain on the next slide how you can listen to it. After you've listened to it, well, you could read it aloud. And then you could repeat the task if you wanted to. So let's look at the next slide. Now, there are 2 halves to the slide here. On one side, you've got what to do if you use the app, and on the other side, you've got what to do if you're using the Edge browser. If you're using the app, just hold your finger down on the improved version, and this menu will appear. Click on Read Aloud, And with luck, it will detect the language and read it aloud in that language. You can choose voices if there are different voices available for the language you've used, and those are in the settings. If you're using the Edge browser, you have to select the part that you want to be read aloud. And when you select text, you then get options to copy, to save, select all, read aloud, or some other possibilities. Click on read aloud. Do that, listen to it, and read aloud the text afterwards. I'll give you a few minutes to do that. We've looked at stage 1, and now we've looked at stage 2. Stage 2 might be the point where you stop, particularly if you're introducing all these ideas little by little. You may decide that this week you're going to stop at stage 2 and get your students to repeat the task and record themselves again. But after a few days, a few weeks, you might want to move on to stage 3. Stage 3 is adapting the prompt and using only the first 5 steps. So the first 3 were about corrections, 4 and 5 were about upgrading the language to half a CEFR level above the student's use of the language. Once again, students could work with their neighbour to look at the suggestions for changes. Certainly the person who made the recording should note down any interesting better ways of expressing themselves. They can listen to the improved version at half a level up, read it aloud, and they could repeat the task at the end of this. So let's have a look at that again. Now, you don't need this because you've already got the 9-step prompt. So what you should do now, remember you're pretending to be a student, you should write next and click the up arrow to see an improved transcript at the same level, and you'll see the suggested changes. The suggested changes, some of them are going to be interesting, some not so interesting. Anything that's interesting that you would like to incorporate into your language that you can use, make a note of it. At least written down one thing in the suggestions for upgrading your language. So write next and click on the up arrow to see the changed version that you can listen to. Those are the instructions as before, depending on whether you're using the app or using the Edge browser. If you're using another browser, I'm afraid you're not going to be able to listen to it. Listen to it, read it aloud. I hope you had time to listen to the improved version and maybe even had time to read it aloud yourself. So that will be the end of stage 3. At the end of stage 3, if your students are not going to do the next stage, then they should repeat the task here and then record themselves and get the feedback on their improved version. Now we come to stage 4, which could be the final stage. It could be using all nine steps, or you could decide to simplify it and just stop after the first 7 steps. Maybe you felt that the final upgrading of language was too ambitious, would not be helpful for your students. So let's have a look at how to do that. So you provide the students with a 9-step prompt or the 7-step prompt, whichever you want. Remember, you're being a student now. So what you should do is write next and click the up arrow and see the improvements to the transcript 1 level up. And you should take some notes about that on paper so you can use them when you do the speaking task again. Did you find something that was interesting for you to learn and use in the future? Write next and click on the up arrow and you can see the complete text, which you can listen to and you can read it aloud. I'll give you a bit of time to do that. Now, as I said earlier, you may want your students to stop after step 7 and redo the task, record themselves again. But if you'd like to continue, write next and click on the up arrow and you'll see a version of what you said 2 levels up. So there'll probably be some quite sophisticated language here. Look at it. If there's anything you don't understand, ask in the language you were using, what does this word mean? What does this phrase mean? So take some notes. These notes will be very useful for you if you want to do the task again after the end of the webinar and record yourself again. So at the final 9th step, you just write next, click on the up arrow, and you can see the completed text 2.5 levels up from what you said. You can read it, you can listen to it, you can read it aloud. Okay, so we've gone through the 4 stages, which I suggest are a good idea to introduce your students to this stage by stage, not all 9 prompts at a time. But if you want to try all 9 prompts straight away, that's up to you. It may work. What I found with my granddaughter was that the last 2 prompts, she was losing interest by then. She'd perhaps had enough getting to step 7. So here are some ideas for how you can use the whole concept of students recording themselves in the classroom. I had 2 techniques for making sure that students were really communicating. And one of them was to have half the students remain in the class and half the students to go outside and do an exercise in an empty classroom or on the chairs where they could wait before coming into class. So the group who were in the classroom would watch a video 2, 3, 4 times, and they would certainly see the subtitles at some stage. And they'd be asked to take notes the second time they watched the video, because the notes would make it easier for them to retell the story to one of the students from outside. Now, you can use the ones in your course book. When I started out, there were no videos in the course book, and so I had to take a separate series of videos and watch half of a story or one story and get students to retell that. Of course, you can find them on YouTube as well, and I'll show you an example of this.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Sorry. Do you speak English?
No, I don't, sorry.
Oh. My car's broken down and I wondered if you could tell me where to find a garage.
Well, you know, that's wasted on me. I don't understand what you're saying.
You don't speak any English at all?
Not a word, no. It's one of those things where I wish I paid more attention in school, but, excuse me, sorry. Do you speak any English?
English? No. What's the problem?
I don't know, I can't understand it.
Hi, my car's broken down and I need to find a garage.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that at all.
All right, well, thanks.
Tell you what, if you go down that way, about half a mile, there's a village. There might be somebody there that speaks English.
Ich speak ein bisschen Deutsch. Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
Deutsch, nein. Sprichst du Deutsch?
Deutsch? Nein. Nun, ein oder zwei Wörter, aber ich bin nicht fließend.
I'm sorry, could we more help?
Yeah, sorry about that. Hey, you never know. Next time you're over, maybe we'll have learned a bit of English for you.
Ja, oder Deutsch vielleicht.
Ja, das wäre toll.
Thanks, Emily.
I can speak English.
So can I.
Okay, I used that on the first day of class with my students, and the second day of class we used a different video, and the other group went outside. But you can do it with any of the listening exercises in your course book, and very often the reading exercises are also available to be listened to. Here's a photograph of my students doing exactly that, retelling a story that the ones who've got mobile phones in their hands had watched. And it's very sweet because I can remember the names of the students and I can't help smiling. Here's an example of a listening. This is what students listen to.
Happy ending. Suddenly, a man ran across the road. He was wearing a dark coat, so Hannah didn't see him at first. Quickly, she put her foot on the brake. She stopped just in time. She got out of her car and shouted at the man.
Don't you usually look before you cross the road? I nearly hit you.
Now, that's only part of it. Carla then retold the story.
Suddenly, a man ran across the road. And Hannah stops just in time, and she go out the car. She said that the man she didn't see, and the man said sorry, and she looks the man.
Well, you can see that Carla is really quite good. She's quite fluent. She made some mistakes. I actually listened to her recording. It took me 8 minutes to listen to it, to write this feedback, to record myself reading this feedback out loud. I repeated it twice. So I said, Hannah stopped just in time. Hannah stopped just in time. Then I went through and read everything there. It took me 8 minutes to do that. And I asked my students to send me their best recording every week or every 2 weeks. And then I would give them feedback on the first minute of their recordings. And that way I could get it down to 5 minutes per person. But with my suggestions, it should be possible for students to get feedback on all their recordings every time and very quickly. So the second idea I used was to have students working in pairs with one of the students sitting with their back to the board, their back to the screen, so they couldn't see anything that was on the board or the screen. And their partner would be facing the board screen. And I had a number of things that could be done in this way. One of them is the picture story, like the one you just did. You could project the picture story up there. The one who can see it retells the story, possibly including some false detail, as you just did. Another idea is an interview, and the interviewer can see the questions which are projected on the board, and the person being interviewed can't see the questions. So they may need to ask for repetition of the questions if they don't understand it. Let's move on and have a look at an example of that. This is Lydia being interviewed. The first question was, do you consider yourself in general to be lucky person or not?
Yes, I consider that I'm a lucky person because I made a big effort to have to arrive to my I think when I have a challenge, an objective, I consider that I need to work very hard. And normally, if you work very hard, you achieve this challenge or your thing or one thing. If you were either very lucky or very unlucky. Excuse me, repeat. Can you remember a time when you were either very lucky or very unlucky? What happened?
Let's just go back to the previous one there. The third activity with backs to the board was where the student who could see the video that was projected on the screen would describe the action as they happen. To do this, I would turn off the sound. So let's look at an example of that. I've turned off the sound there. So it's somewhere in the country. There are lots of trees and a road that looks as if it's covered in mud. There's a young man walking into the picture. He's wearing a blue jacket and carrying a sort of bag. He's drinking from a can. He's finished it now, and he just throws it away somewhere in the country. He's hitchhiking, and a car's coming past, but the car doesn't stop, and he's a bit angry. Oh, and now he's fallen down. I think he's hurt himself. He's got his foot stuck in a hole. Well, that's probably enough of that. That particular video is 11 minutes long, and what I did with it, I had students describe what they were seeing for 2 minutes, and then they swapped round so that the one who was listening was now doing the describing and vice versa. So what about at home, self-study? Well, students can make a presentation about a holiday illustrated with various photos. Here's an example made by my granddaughter.
The first day we set up early in the morning to Playa Mujeres. To go there, we had to go to Puerto Juárez. From there, we took a ferry to go to Isla Mujeres. Remember to book your excursion some weeks before. The material is included in the price of the excursion. Remember.
I'm sorry, that was probably quite difficult to understand. The volume was very low. But that's taken from a video I made showing the whole of the 9-step prompt in action with a video made by my daughter and I think a couple of classmates. Here's something else that students could do. A long time ago, in the first edition of English File, in the workbook, every unit, there were 5 questions for students to practice orally, but it never said, record yourself doing this. So I made a recording and sent it to my students to give them an idea about what I meant. How long have you known your oldest friend? Oh, I've known Robert since I was at university. So I've known him for more than 40 years. We don't see each other very often, but it's very nice we do. How long have you had your mobile phone? Well, you can see I read the questions and then answered them. Students can also retell any reading or listening text from notes that they take. So they could use reading texts or listening texts which are in the workbook. And of course, they can find their own short YouTube videos to retell from notes. So what I'd like you to do now is to give your opinion about this. Was it easy to record yourself using TurboScribe? Did you get the transcript quickly? So strongly agree, strongly disagree, and strongly agree. Was it easy to make changes to your transcript on TurboScribe? Was it easy to connect TurboScribe to ChatGPT? What do you think of this idea? Allowing students to identify their errors first, was that useful? It was a good idea to show the corrections in this way, you remember, with a little arrow. Showing the improved versions will be useful. Certainly it made it possible to listen to it. And I want to try this with my students. So you can use the QR code there or use this number here, not the number at the top. That number isn't valid. It's this number here. And because I've got a free account, the first 50 people to answer will be able to. So I didn't mention that ChatGPT and TurboScribe can't really correct the pronunciation of students. You either have to do that yourself, or you could get your students to use one of these things: Reading Coach, Speech Coach, Speak and Improve, or Speech Ace. All of them assess your fluency, and 3 of them at least check your pronunciation. I belong to these 5 Facebook groups. They're all groups on Facebook which deal with technology and language teaching. Do join them. I found them very stimulating, and I post quite frequently there too. I also belong to a Telegram channel run by Nick Peachy. I've got my own blog where I write about this subject quite frequently. And here are 3 tools that you can use to grade the level of a text produced by ChatGPT. I found that an average of Pearson's Text Analyzer and Text Inspector was the best. I've created a WhatsApp group, which you're very welcome to join. Once more, you've got a QR code or a short code there. What you'll find there is links to the folder at the beginning, and you'll be able to post and read the latest things that I post about speech to text in language searching and teaching. Well, I don't know whether we're going to have time to do question and answer, but as this is a rehearsal, there are no questions. You can contact me on LinkedIn, by my Gmail, by my home email, and ask me about anything that interested you, anything you need more information about. You can also watch things on my YouTube channel here. I've tried Blue Sky. I abandoned Twitter because of Elon Musk, but I haven't really got to grips with Blue Sky. So I hope that was useful. Please keep in touch.